The vision and future planning of the United States and the restructuring of the globe into a new world order is not limited to any particular US president, since globalism is a goal that may span 25 years plus. The maximum two-term limit of a US president is about 8 years. This is the reason why there are men in the shadows who steer national and foreign policy in a certain direction. The globalists work through groups such as the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, and the Vatican, which has insinuated itself as the New World Order religion, but encompassing all religion through interfaith. These groups and organisations have built a framework that US presidents must work within, or risk being assassinated. The chilling infiltration of both American and European institutions is widespread. The Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, Knights Columbus, Freemasonry and Skull and Bones, which are secretly subservient to the Vatican and controlled by the Jesuit order. This is why you see George Bush making the Skull and Bones sign while receiving communion. One can also discern the level of papal involvement by the behaviour of John Kerry. Donald Trump, like his predecessors, must work within the system, including working towards globalist ambitions such as the Club of Rome's plan to divide the world into 10 manageable regions, with the Pope as the supreme ruler. We only have to be reminded of what happened to JFK, who rebuffed globalists, intelligence agencies, secret societies, and the Roman Catholic Church, even though he was a Catholic. JFK did many things contrary to the objectives of the deep state and the Vatican. He wanted to de-escalate involvement in Vietnam, dismantle the Federal Reserve, stated he wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces, and to his detriment made a speech that greatly displeased the Vatican about the subject of separation between church and state. JFK was essentially a New World Order nonconformist who had to be eliminated.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
The event surrounding the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was another event that has been whitewashed by historians and academics. The irrefutable connection to the Jesuit order of the Vatican has been buried under a mountain of frivolous information. Statements from Lincoln himself have been omitted that tell of his anxiety towards an unseen battle with the Pope. Charles Quinniqui, a close friend of President Lincoln, was a disillusioned Catholic priest who had left the Catholic Church and become a Presbyterian minister. He confirmed that the Vatican was behind the Confederate cause, the death of President Lincoln, and that Lincoln's assassins were faithful Roman Catholics ultimately serving Pope Pius IX. The Vatican assassin was John Wilkes Booth, aided and abetted by other staunch Catholics. Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, George Asteros, David Herold and John Surratt, who were coached by a Jesuit priest. At the time of the trial and hanging, the US government decided to hide the Vatican conspiracy from the public, in case of a public backlash against Catholics from an overwhelming Protestant majority. A psychologist stated in TheAtlantic.com that Donald Trump has personality traits of narcissism, disagreeableness, and grandiosity. These personality traits seem undesirable. In many respects, it is a safeguard from the tyranny of the establishment and the men in the shadows. If you look at those removed from power, like Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, as well as leaders whom the US wants to remove, like Assad and Putin, they all have one thing in common. They are independent thinkers, not willing to be a sock puppet for globalists, unlike Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump would be more likely to do things his own way rather than heed the counsel of advisors of think tank groups and the Jesuit order. Obama was surrounded by Jesuit-trained advisors because he, like Bush, Clinton, and so many other presidents, are not the real power behind the political throne. However, Trump, like Kennedy, is reliant on the Secret Service to protect him, aircraft mechanics to make sure his plane does not crash, and master chefs to make sure his food is not tainted. Trump will have to make concessions or risk being assassinated.
Involved with Putin, for I have nothing to do with Putin. I've never spoken to him. I don't know anything about him other than he will respect me. I don't think Putin has any respect whatsoever for Clinton. I think he does respect me. And I hope I get along great with him. It's possible that we won't, Jeremy. I hope that we get along great with Putin, because it would be great to have Russia with a good relationship. Right now we don't have a good relationship.
And the purpose of that infiltration was what for?
Well, the purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government. What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, throughout all these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously. There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goals of the Roman Catholic institution. Two doctrines define this very well. One is called the doctrine of the apostolic succession, and that is dealing with the papacy. And the other is the doctrine, the temporal power, and that is dealing with world government.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
Britons who voted for their country to leave the EU have been dealt a blow by the UK High Court's ruling on Thursday. It said, of course, the government will need Parliament's approval to go ahead with the Brexit. Well, some British media blasted the ruling, with one newspaper going as far as to call the judges who made the decision enemies of the people. And Brexit figurehead Nigel Farage had this ominous warning.
I worry that the betrayal may be near at hand. I now fear that every attempt will be made to block or delay the triggering of Article 50. If this is so, they have no idea of the level of public anger they will provoke.
Well, worries over Brexit's possible derailment may be sparked by the fact that most British MPs are in the Remain camp. We discussed it with Talk Radio host John Gaunt.
It's an unholy mess. It's going to delay things forever. It's going to lead to a lot of distrust and a lot of disenchantment with mainstream politicians. So now we're going to have this saga where it's going to be dragged out. There are so many MPs across the parties who don't actually want Brexit. However, they asked the British public what they wanted in the biggest democratic exercise in over 50 years. And overwhelmingly, the British public said they wanted Brexit and they wanted to get out of the EU. Which part of Brexit don't they understand? It was a clear signal that the people want out. This was an affront to democracy, and this is a day that Britain should be totally ashamed of.
The idea of a new world order is not new. The biblical story of the Tower of Babel tells of a people who wish to be united contrary to the purposes of God. So the new world order today, under guise of unity and peace, will consolidate the world under apostasy and financial fraud. Malachi Martin, a Jesuit scholar who died under suspicious circumstances, wrote popular books such as The Jesuits and The Keys of This Blood, revealing as early as 1990 what is happening today in regard to globalism and the quest of three major players contesting to each be the leader of the new world order. Malachi Martin is by no means a prophet, but as he stated, because the Vatican has over 2,000 years of experience, they can predict many events that will take place in the religio-politico sphere. Malachi Martin, in his book Keys of this blood explained that three major powers fought tooth and nail for supremacy of the world: the United States, the Soviet Union, and the Vatican. However, the United States and Vatican merged and became powerful allies to undermine the Soviet Union politically and economically. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States and the Vatican have been frustrated by the rise of the strongman Putin. It is important to note that even though Roman Catholicism is a minority, they control the US Supreme Court, intelligence agencies, and the military. The Council on Foreign Relations published an article called The Fusion of Civilizations, which in summary form puts forward the viewpoint that the world is coming together, not falling apart. On first glance, that assessment seems contradictory, since there are conflicts, turmoil and contentions all over the world. There have been, and are, ongoing wars in the Middle East which have now caused hundreds of thousands of deaths, as well as the refugee crisis that has seen a mass exodus from Syria into Western Europe. There are also tensions between NATO and Russia and disputes in the South China Sea. Yet the Council on Foreign Relations is insistent that we are in the process of the fusion of civilizations. Those who are not familiar with Hegel's philosophy of the triad method or dialectic, in which thesis, antithesis, become synthesis, have been misled with headings such as the clash of the civilizations, when in fact that clash is a precursor to the fusion of civilizations. The fateful day of 9/11 was the catalyst forcing cultures, religions and ethnic division into a Hegelian dialectic struggle, making the pain of being apart worse than the pain of coming together. Barriers are slowly being broken down, which is exactly what the elite planned and envisioned. After the First World War, the League of Nations was set up, and after World War II, the United Nations came into existence. Ex-Israeli President Shimon Peres put forward the idea that UN-style united religions, with Pope Francis as the head, would be sufficient to stay the world's religious bickering. Surely this is the social engineering method called the problem-reaction-solution model, causing the friction between religions, by using US ally Saudi Arabia to spread its extreme version of Islam called Wahhabism, which is a backward and intolerant version of Islam. The classified 28-page report implicating the 9/11 hijackers to have been controlled by Saudi government officials was finally released in July 2016, a victory due to public pressure and a handful of US senators. However, the release was met with much resistance from the Obama administration and his predecessors, the Bush-Cheney administration. The 28-page report concluded that the hijackers were funded by Saudi Prince Bandar bin Sultan, then ambassador to the US. What role did he and his father Prince Sultan bin Abdul Aziz, then Minister of Defense and Aviation, play in the role of 9/11? Research concludes that 9/11 was a US-Saudi joint operation. The same could be said about ISIS, who was supported and funded by Saudi and given the green light by the Central Intelligence Agency. It's very clear that the United States was involved in the rise and progress of ISIS because of Russia's President Putin showing them up by bombing ISIS oil fields that paid the salaries of Islamic State mercenaries. Only then did the US start bombing minor ISIS oil targets to win back some credibility.
You'll find that men in the same society will take opposite positions in public. The method they use is that of the Hegelian dialectic. Thesis played against antithesis leads to a synthesis. In other words, for Hegel, for history to make progress, you have to have conflict.
It is logical to conclude that terrorism and the wars it spawns are, as Mr. Sutton put it, a managed conflict, and a typical Hegelian conflict with an outcome such as synthesis. And let us not forget the money generated for the military-industrial complex. The objective of the globalists at this present time is to redraw existing Middle East borders, such as the outdated 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement that carved up the Middle East. A map was circulating within the Pentagon in 2006 of redrawn borders in the Middle East, breaking it up into manageable states that include autonomous regions for the Kurds, Shias and other ethnic minorities. The elite want to make the Middle East into a union similar to that of the European Union. Remember, Dick Cheney made this statement.
Do you think that the US or UN forces should have moved into Baghdad?
No.
Why not?
Because if we'd gone to Baghdad, we would have been all alone. There wouldn't have been anybody else with us. It would have been a U.S. occupation of Iraq. None of the Arab forces that were willing to fight with us in Kuwait were willing to invade Iraq. Once you got to Iraq and took it over, and took down Saddam Hussein's government, then what are you going to put in its place? That's a very volatile part of the world, and if you take down the central government in Iraq, you can easily end up seeing pieces of Iraq fly off. Part of it the Syrians would like to have to the west. Part of eastern Iraq the Iranians would like to claim, fought over for 8 years. In the north you've got the Kurds, and if the Kurds spin loose and join with the Kurds in Turkey, then you threaten the territorial integrity of Turkey. It's a quagmire.
12 years after the 1991 Iraq War, the United States coalition in 2003 invaded Iraq, toppling Saddam Hussein, being fully aware of the consequences that might undermine Iraq as different ethnic groups might want their own nation. This division or breakup of existing Middle East borders suited think tank groups such as the Club of Rome, the Bilderberg Group and Council on Foreign Relations, because the time was right to implement the group to redraw the Middle East map. Erdogan, Turkey's Prime Minister, has not only given ISIS safe passage into Syria, but medical attention and arms.
As just mentioned, reports have emerged suggesting that Turkish hospitals are treating jihadists wounded on the battlefields of Syria. It's something that Ankara is categorically denying, though. Dogo Erglu is one of the journalists who managed to visit the facilities and then broke the story.
My impression of your argument is that some Arab countries who are now engaged in the fight against ISIS earlier supported the rise of ISIS.
Well, in any way, sir, you're fully aware that not only regional countries, some regional countries, but also some countries from outside our region were supporting various terrorist groups. The United States herself has been a supporter of them, and these types of supports have come in various forms, some financially, some with equipping, and some made their country the territory of their nations as a passageway to the field of battle, and some encouraged them in their domestic media and international media. All of them in one fashion or another encouraged and supported these terrorists.
Turkey, a NATO member, has recently sided with Russia, even though Turkey shot down a Russian plane that's conducting missions in Syria targeting ISIS. The reason for Erdogan running back to Putin's Russia is that Erdogan's hope for a new quasi-Ottoman empire was left in tatters after learning that Saudi will be the headquarters of the Middle East Union because it has Mecca, the most holy site of Islam, where Muslim pilgrims participate in the Hajj. Erdogan also wanted entrance into the EU. After realising that the elite had no particular leadership role for Turkey in the New World Order, he started to rebel. The Central Intelligence Agency then organised a coup against Erdogan, prompting him to restore diplomatic relations with Russia.
Security forces in Lebanon interrogated a Saudi prince on charges of carrying 24 bags and 8 suitcases full of narcotics.
Huge drug bust shines a very bright spotlight on one of the little-known drivers fueling the Syrian civil war. The drug is an amphetamine called Captagon.
Captagon is the drug of choice among ISIS radical fighters and were used extensively by those fighters who overthrew Gaddafi. Society really considers the bigger picture or the motives of think tank groups and politicians who plan and engineer wars, revolutions and political change to bring order out of chaos. If you think of the model of pouring cold water and hot water into a glass to make it lukewarm, so the extremities of different cultures and religions will become less exclusive and divided. Some example of fundamentalist religions are the Shia sect of Islam and the Seventh-day Adventists. However, the definition of a fundamentalist has been given a negative connotation by mainstream media, now being intertwined with terrorism. The dictionary definition is 1. Religious movement characterized by a strict belief in the literal interpretation of religious texts, especially within American Protestantism and Islam. 2. The beliefs held by those in this movement. 3. The strict adherence to any set of basic ideas or principles. For example, the fundamentalism of the extreme conservatives. Pope Francis only recently declared war on fundamentalists. Seventh-day Adventists and Orthodox Jews pose particular problems for Vatican-controlled globalists, since the plan for a New World Order Day of Rest is planned to be Sunday. opposing the biblical command in Exodus chapter 20 verse 8, "Remember to keep the Sabbath holy," Saturday. The globalization of culture happens when the world has been influenced by Western multiculturalism, Western entertainment, ideas and products such as Big Macs, Hollywood movies and MTV are touted as unmistakable signs of the fulfillment of Marshall McLuhan's prophecy of the global village. The globalization of culture is often chiefly imputed to international mass media. After all, contemporary media technologies such as satellite television and the internet have created a steady flow of transnational images that connect audiences worldwide. No wonder US presidential candidates, who are backed by companies such as Coca-Cola, promote globalism. The psychological effect of Western values, ideas and entertainment are another tool to combat fundamentalism or exclusivism by building subliminal bridges between cultures, religions and ethnic groups. Another interesting point is that apocalyptic films are carrying subliminal messages encouraging world unity, such as 2012 Independence Day impregnating the minds of the next generation. The Syrian refugee crisis was not the original plan, but since Assad was not so easily removed, the globalists opted to use the crisis to their own advantage. Winston Churchill popularized the Machiavelli quote, "Never waste a good opportunity offered by a good crisis." The Syrian refugees who have flooded Europe have been used as a social engineering exercise in a typical dialectic struggle to further obliterate any sense of national identity of nations in Western Europe. Those who accept large quotas of immigrants, such as Europe, Scandinavia, Australia and New Zealand, are blind to the fact that the elite are targeting their identity as a nation. Ask yourself how many Muslim countries have welcomed refugees. Saudi Arabia has an unused tent city that can accommodate at least 3 million people. Only Turkey and Lebanon have taken refugees, but these two countries have mostly been transit points. The same social engineering ploy used in Western Europe and the South Pacific is also being used within the United States. Roman Catholic Mexicans are illegally crossing the US-Mexican border, neutralizing the mainly Protestant nation of the US. This is the reason Pope Francis was so upset by Trump's statement about erecting a border wall between the United States and Mexico, as more Catholics in the United States would give the Pope even greater political clout.
Thank God he said I was a politician, because Aristotle defined the human person as animal politicus. So at least I'm a human person. As to whether I'm a pawn, well, maybe. I don't know. I'll leave that up to your judgment and that of the people. And then, a person who thinks only about building walls, wherever they may be located, and not building bridges, is not a Christian. This is not in the gospel. As far as what you said about whether I would advise to vote or not vote, I am not going to get involved in that. I say only that this man is not a Christian if he has said things like that.
Just when I thought I'd seen it all, it happened. Since last year, when the Pope started calling for us to open our borders up and started saying that we were racist and evil for not doing it, I pointed out that even the New York Times admits Mexico has one of the strictest southern borders with Guatemala in the world, and upwards of a year in prison, forced labor, if they catch you trying to sneak in. So I said, why do we have to be wide open? And then once people get here, put them on welfare and make them collectivist Bernie Sanders voters. And then when I traveled to Rome last year and actually saw the 200-foot plus walls, on average over 90 feet, it blew me away around Vatican City, which they say themselves in the tours is the oldest sovereign nation, tax exempt, above the law in the world.
And I mean, I just had word as an example, the Pope. The Pope was in Mexico. Do you know that? Does everyone know, right? He said negative things about me because the Mexican government convinced him that Trump is not a good guy, because I want to have a strong border. I want to stop illegal immigration. I want to stop people from being killed, like Kate in San Francisco, like Jamil in Los Angeles, like the incredible woman veteran, 65 years old, who's raped, sodomized, and killed by an illegal immigrant, okay? So the Mexican government fed the Pope a tremendous amount of stuff about Trump is not a good person, And the Pope just made a statement. Can you imagine? I just got a call. As I'm walking up here, they said, Mr. Trump, the Pope made a statement about you. I said, the Pope? What did the Pope say? I like the Pope. I mean, was it good or bad? Because if it's good, I like the Pope. If it's bad, I don't like the Pope.
Though immigration sometimes carries an economical factor, the globalist agenda is to obliterate any sense of national identity so that the Club of Rome can usher in her 10-region agenda. This is a precursor to the New World Order that will give absolute power to the Pope.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, why is it happening? I mean, if you research this conspiracy for not very long, you realize that it is like a room of dominoes in a line, and you push one domino down and that creates the next domino to fall. So we've had this situation in the Middle East where we've had all this bombing and destruction and chaos and catastrophe externally created by the United States, NATO, Britain. And this has forced large numbers of people to leave. And this wave into Europe has of genuine people who deserve our help because of the situation that the West has put them in, has been joined by vast numbers of other people who are not refugees but are seeking to get into Europe. And it's being allowed to happen for this reason. And it's been long planned for this reason. They want a world government, a world central bank, world army, and world currency, etc. And under the world government, they want these super states. They want the European Union, of course, the American Union, the Pacific Union, all these super states under the world government. And these super states are designed not to be countries any longer, but to be broken up into regions, subordinate regions that are easy to control. You've talked about this in relation to the United States and North America, and it's planned for the world. Now, the biggest resistance to the breakup and ending of sovereignty is a sense of national identity.
The founders of the CIA, which replaced the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, were Alan Dulles, a Knight of Malta, Harry Truman, a Freemason, and William J. Donovan, who was also a Knight of Malta. Every director of the CIA has had some connection to the Jesuit order, through either a secret society, a Jesuit priest, or a Jesuit education. The CIA vet potential US presidents, often grooming candidates or sabotaging them, like the Trump hot mic incident. Here it was apparent that Billy Bush egged Trump on while recording him. Billy Bush is a member of the Bush dynasty. The Bush family are deeply involved with the CIA, the Vatican, and Skull and Bones, a secret society that makes their initiates carry out immoral acts or confess sordid details of their lives. These initiates can then be controlled or blackmailed if they start to think independently outside the order. The Parliament of the United Kingdom is controlled in a similar way. Both the House of Lords and the House of Commons are mostly controlled by MI5 or MI6 through blackmailing or destroying individuals with recordings, such as videotapes of politicians engaging in bad behaviour, such as soliciting prostitutes and even pedophilia parties. That is the secret of how politicians are controlled or destroyed by intelligence agencies. Since 9/11, the only director of the CIA who has not been Jesuit trained was Michael Morrell, who is a member of Skull and Bones, a society controlled by the Jesuit order. James Clapper, staunch Roman Catholic, is Director of National Intelligence, a position that makes him an advisor to the President and generally an overseer of all intelligence agencies. The Vatican now controls intelligence agencies, which gives the Jesuits a carte blanche to carry out operations not only in secret, but at the expense of the everyday American taxpayer.
An astonishing admission by the Roman Catholic Church. They run the CIA. Did you know the CIA is also dubbed Catholic Intelligence Agency? Catholics in Action. Is the CIA truly American? For decades, Jesuit affiliates of the Roman Catholic Church have directed the CIA. Leon Panetta and John Brennan, the current director, are Jesuit trained. Are Jesuits today the same as Jesuits of the past? Are you familiar with the Jesuit oath? its devious plans to control the wealth of the nations, enslave the masses, and depopulate the world. Pope Francis is a Jesuit. Should we be alarmed that the institution the Pope heads also controls the CIA? The CIA's mission is to identify and destroy terrorists and fundamentalists. Pope Francis likewise, and defines them as those who believe in absolute truth, end-time prophecies of Daniel and the Revelation, refuse to yield their liberty of conscience and give up constitutional rights. The insidious agenda of the Jesuits will soon be realized, as Pope Francis has been hailed Lord of the world and Savior of the earth.
What does CIA stand for?
The Central Intelligence Agency.
That is correct. That is what the CIA stands for. Now, do you know what the primary job of the CIA is?
I think their primary job would be similar to the police force, but more the head of law enforcement.
Now, Marianne, what is the primary job of the CIA?
I believe it has to do with foreign intelligence.
The CIA is the foreign spying agency for America.
That is also correct. Now, they collect, analyze, evaluate, and disseminate foreign intelligence in order to help make decisions that relate to national security. So you're right.
So, Jerome, can you guess what religious group has predominantly run the CIA?
I would assume Christians or Catholics.
Now, can you guess what religious group has predominantly run the CIA?
I'm going to assume or guess the Catholic religion.
That is correct. Why do you guess that?
Because I figured that they might have a lot of involvement with the CIA.
Now, the CIA has been predominantly run by Roman Catholics, and a high percentage of them have been members of the Jesuit Society. Yeah. So, do you know who Jesuits are, Marianne?
Kind of, yes. I was raised Catholic, so I'm familiar with Jesuits.
Okay. And what can you tell me about Jesuits?
Well, they seem to be more liberal priests, I guess.
All right, so they are a male congregation in the Roman Catholic Church, as you know. And so what we're going to do is just read the Jesuit oath, okay? So have you follow along. It says,
I furthermore promise and declare that I will,
when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics.
I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive.
Rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women in order to annihilate forever their terrible race. So, Lucas, what are your thoughts on the Jesuit oath?
Well, based on that oath, I'm not too fond of the group. I haven't really looked into what else they claim to stand for, but it's kind of concerning to have a group, like you said, so involved in central intelligence and everything, and being so motivated by these values.
So what are your thoughts on the Jesuit oath?
The Jesuits are pretty bad people. Sounds like they want to kill people. That's not a good thing, is it?
Based on the Jesuit oath, the excerpt that we just read, what are your thoughts on Pope Francis being so impactful in social and political issues?
I think that we should keep our, separation of state and church. I believe that the Pope should stick to his religious issues, and then the government needs to handle the government issues.
So now, based on the Jesuit oath, because Pope Francis is a Jesuit, right? How do you feel about Pope Francis being so impactful in political and social issues?
I feel that's a sign of prophecy. So I'm not surprised. It's, the Catholic religion is a religion of a universal religion trying to get everyone in the world to follow their same creed. So that doesn't surprise me.
Wow, Sean, I was going to ask you now, are you aware that the Bible tells us there is a time coming when our liberty of conscience will be stripped away, and that those who stand true to the principles of Protestantism will not be able to buy and sell?
Yes, Revelation.
The Catholic Herald, which is a news publication for the Roman Catholic Church, gives us a new and interesting way to look at the CIA, or the Central Intelligence Agency. By professing right in the very front page of this Catholic Herald news, it states that the Catholic Church thrives in the CIA. The headlines read, "Why Catholics Thrive in the CIA." The agency has been dubbed, and I quote, "Catholics in action," end quote, because the faithful have occupied so many senior positions. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a plain easy giveaway, and it should not take a rocket scientist or anyone with great qualifications to understand that the Roman Jesuits, or should I say the Vatican, is the one that runs the Central Intelligence Agency. Make some very interesting notes here. Make note that the CIA thrives in the United States of America. It has the seal of the United States and the symbol of the United States right on it. The eagle is right there. Secondly, make note, the Jesuit order thrives primarily at the Vatican. However, what you need to understand is that the Jesuit order is a secret police for the Vatican, and what they have done is they have successfully infiltrated every other governmental structure in the world today. But they will disguise themselves as Roman Catholics, and that is because they are Roman Catholics. Just as you have Joe Biden, he is the first Roman Catholic Vice President of the United States of America. While he is the very first Vice President who is a Roman Catholic, we also have the very first Jesuit Roman Catholic leader, the Pope, Pope Francis. In case you missed it, let me go back and repeat myself again so you will understand exactly what I'm telling you. These Jesuits, though they infiltrate other governmental structures, they simply will never tell you that they are Jesuits, but they will tell you that they are simply Roman Catholics. Their allegiance belongs to the Pope. These so-called Roman Catholics, they are Jesuits, especially the ones who are in political structures or in judicial positions of power. The United States of America is run by Jesuits. They used the order of the Masons as scapegoats. The majority of people, the minute they hear the words Freemason, they automatically think the most evil secret society. But when they hear Jesuits, they think, oh, Pope Francis is a Jesuit, he's a good person, he's a Roman Catholic. I think the Jesuits are connected to the Roman Catholics. They have hospitals and schools and many other good institutions, so they're not that bad. But that's how they operate. They operate in a very subtle way. The evidence for this is that we see a reflection between America and the Vatican. The United States Capitol is designed to resemble the Vatican. The obelisk in the United States of America also is a direct reflection of the obelisk of Rome and the Vatican. The symbols of sun worship within the Freemasons and within the Jesuit order, it's all the exact same. Going back to the CIA, when we look at the symbol of the CIA, the United States seal, what we also
The attention placed on the NSA's mass surveillance of American citizens, it's easy to forget the other countries that are taking a page out of the agency's spy book. Just this past weekend, it was revealed that in 2008, Australia's surveillance agency shared information about the country's citizens with its most trusted intelligence partners. Perhaps the most concerning part of this recently leaked Snowden document was the discussion between these allies over whether or not to share the medical, legal, and religious information of Australian citizens. But this story is just a microcosm of the larger international spying cabal working together to peer into every nook and cranny of the world. So who exactly are these peeping partners? Well, they call themselves the Five Eyes, a partnership made up of intelligence agencies in 5 English-speaking countries: the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And just like the Eye of Sauron, eyes see all, which is an especially appropriate analogy since The Lord of the Rings was filmed in New Zealand. But I digress. You see, the Five Eyes Agreement has been around since the end of World War II, but it was so secret that the program wasn't even disclosed to the public until 2005. On the surface, this treaty is just a friendly agreement between allied nations that it's essential to stopping global terrorism. But thanks to the Snowden leaks, we now know just what an asinine agreement it's actually being used for: industrial espionage and circumventing those pesky laws that prohibit warrantless surveillance of a country's own citizens. In theory, these nations are not allowed to spy on each other's people, but we all know rules are meant to be broken. In 2007, the NSA analyzed and retained any British citizen's mobile phone number, email, and IP address swept up in its enormous dragnet. Another memo dated from 2005 shows that the NSA was working on a procedure to spy on the other 4 countries. And while one sentence in the memo states that the US and UK will not explicitly target each other, the very next sentence says governments reserve the right to spy on each other's citizens when it's in the best interest of each nation. Well, that's not open to interpretation at all. Look, I think it's clear at this point that the myth of the American empire exporting freedom and democracy really means exporting surveillance and subjugation. Guys, there's a lot going on in the world, a lot that you might disagree with. As much as we protest and complain to our elected representatives, it doesn't seem to shape the actual legislation put into action. Foreign policy is supposed to be drafted between the president and Congress, but that would be too easy, it'd be too democratic. So instead, legislation is now outsourced. Policy prescriptions are made by think tanks and NGOs like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Atlantic Council, and the Trilateral Commission. The idea of having academics researching world issues, pairing with world journalists to help keep our elected officials informed sounds like a good idea, right? Sure. But what happens when the policy recommendations are being made by the councils and think tanks whose board members are the CEOs of some of the biggest corporations in the world? Is it a conflict of interest that many of these councils are run by executives from almost every major industry, from food to media, and most shockingly, national defense? Let's take a look at just some of the few. The Council on Foreign Relations. Their mission statement is in part sponsoring independent task forces that produce reports with both findings and policy prescriptions on the most important foreign policy topics. The question I ask is, what sort of policy prescriptions can we expect from a board of directors that includes Madeleine Albright and Colin Powell, both of whom served as U.S. Secretary of State, and Tom Brokaw and Fareed Zakaria, both 2 well-known establishment journalists? So, these folks aren't even in government anymore, yet they sit on the board of one of the most influential think tanks in the world. Now, if you doubt the CFR's influence, just take a listen of a clip of Hillary Clinton's first visit as Secretary of State to the CFR headquarters right here in Washington, D.C.
We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
What we should be doing and how we should think about the future? Gee, Hillary, you're really letting the cat out of the bag there. Now, you may be wondering why you don't hear about these groups' influence from the corporate media. As I mentioned before, extremely powerful and influential media moguls sit on these boards. They are part of the establishment, and the CFR is only one of these groups. What about the Atlantic Council? According to the Atlantic Council's website, part of their focus is on drafting roadmaps for U.S. policy toward the Balkans, Cuba, Iraq, Iran, and Libya. Now, this is especially interesting because membership of the Atlantic Council includes some of the top defense corporations in the country: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon. So why are the top defense corporations in the world advising our lawmakers on foreign policy? As we know, the revolving door between government and corporations never stops spinning.
The Bilderberg Group can be summed up in their goals and aspirations by looking at the founders. Joseph Ratzinger, who once studied to be a Catholic priest in a Jesuit seminary, was concerned about the anti-Americanism in Western Europe. He approached Prince Berhard of the Netherlands, who then in turn contacted Paul van Zeeland of the Catholic Party of Belgium. Prince Berhard contacted Walter Bedell Smith, director of the CIA, and facilitated guest lists through Eisenhower's advisor Charles Douglas Jackson, who was an expert in psychological warfare and director of the defunct OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, the forerunner of the CIA. So the Bilderberg Group founders consisted of royalty, intelligence service directors, a member of the Roman Catholic political party, and the influences of the Jesuit order Novitiate, Joseph Ratzinger. Enough said.
Well, secretive and elite. The Bilderberg Group unites the world's most powerful people behind closed doors. It's been happening for decades. Some even believe it's a venue where the world's most rich and powerful conspire to carve out a new world order. RT correspondent Abby Martin was in Chantilly, Virginia today to let us know what's happening outside of the Bilderberg Conference and joins us now to tell us all about it. Abby, nice to see you. So we have a lot of powerful people all in one room. Happens all the time. So what's all the fuss about?
Yeah, egregious violation of federal law. There's an act called the Logan Act, which says that you cannot meet with foreign diplomats without congressional oversight. And I think that that's really the main key here is people are like, hold on, why are there 130 of the most powerful world players in banking, mining, oil, food, media, defense, and politics? Why are they all getting together and meeting in secrecy behind closed doors without any congressional oversight or really any awareness of what it is they're talking about?
We need to make the Iranians pay a price in Syria. We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing I would do...
We make them pay the price by killing Russians?
Yes.
Russia has violated the sovereignty and territorial integrity of an independent European nation, Ukraine, and engaged in provocative behavior toward NATO allies.
Crimeans voted overwhelmingly on Sunday to break away from Ukraine and join Russia in a referendum the West condemned as illegal. With half the ballots counted, 95.5% of Crimea residents voted to break away from Ukraine.
We're moving forward with the most significant reinforcement of our collective defense any time since the Cold War.
The tangible sign of rising tensions between the West and Russia. Hundreds of US armored vehicles have been arriving in Latvia with thousands of troops to follow.
First, we're strengthening NATO's defense and deterrence posture, building on our European Reassurance Initiative, which has already increased readiness from the Baltics to the Black Sea. Our alliance will enhance our forward presence on our eastern flank. As I announced yesterday, the United States will be the lead nation here in Poland, deploying a battalion of American soldiers. The United Kingdom will take the lead in Estonia, Germany and Lithuania, and Canada and Latvia. This will mean some 4,000 additional NATO troops on a rotational basis in this region. Moreover, the additional U.S. Armored Brigade will rotate through Europe, including an additional 4,000 U.S. troops. Meanwhile, to the south, we agreed on new deterrence measures in Romania and Bulgaria. So NATO is sending a clear message that we will defend every ally.
Russia is not willing to be subservient to the US Vatican version of the New World Order. Mikhail Gorbachev said the world has never been closer to nuclear war than it is at present. After President Obama made his speech, leaders within the European Union stated that Obama and NATO were making Europe less secure. Francois Hollande said we don't need the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO doesn't get to decide Europe's Russia relations. The leaders of the two major German political parties, both the Social Democrats and the Christian Democratic Party, said that NATO was warmongering. William Perry, the former head of the Pentagon in the mid-90s, said that NATO is threatening and trying to provoke atomic war in Europe. One of Russia's leading strategists said NATO wants to move bombers and atomic weapons right up to the border of Russia, and if NATO launches a nuclear strike, we only have a few seconds to retaliate. The last bastions of defiance of a US-style global government are Russia, Iran, China, the Assad regime, and the Hezbollah faction. China, being the most resilient because of the elite's needs, keeping manufacturing in China so companies like Walmart and Amazon can make mega profits, as well as China buying US government debt. So the China-United States relationship is a complex and symbiotic one. Russia is dependent on oil sales, which make up 68% of exports, so sanctions on oil hit the Russian economy hard. George Soros has stated that Russia has only around 2 years of gold reserves, and when the gold runs out, that could potentially wreak havoc on Russia. The United States, Canada and the United Kingdom have sent troops to Eastern European nations bordering Russia, as well as a large stockpile of military vehicles. Seemingly, the US-NATO strategy was to deceive Russia into building a large contingent of ground forces to defend its borders at a huge cost to its already struggling economy with potentially crippling consequences. It is important to note that no nation in the world at this present time has a land army that could successfully invade another country because of the massive cost. However, Putin has been too clever to fall into that trap, but insists on the right to use nuclear weapons if attacked. Since NATO's plan has not worked, it is likely the US-NATO forces will create an incident on the Estonian-Russia border to draw Russia into a local conflict with minimal threat to Western Europe or the United States, similar to the 2008 George Bush proxy war in Georgia that Russia crushed very quickly. Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia and Slovenia are members of NATO, with Serbia possibly to join. There have been reports that NATO has been pressuring those nations bordering Russia with threats such as economic and membership penalties imposed by the EU. Serbia is the latest nation to be bullied into joining NATO. Former NATO commander Philip Breedlove has been labelled a warmonger and has had to defend himself over leaked emails that showed him plotting to push President Obama to escalate tensions with Russia, revealed by hackers who broke into his email account and exposed Breedlove's plot to start World War III covert religious war going on that is not at all publicised due to the mainstream media press focusing on national governments and organisations like NATO.
At the G20, there were smiles and handshakes, but little mincing of words. At a private meeting, Canada's Stephen Harper told Mr. Putin, "I guess I'll shake your hand, but I have only one thing to say to you. You need to get out of Ukraine." In his remarks Sunday, President Obama offered Mr. Putin a way back to better relations.
My communications to him was no different than what I've said publicly, as well as what I've said to him privately over the course of this crisis in Ukraine. And that is, Russia has the opportunity to take a different path.
While other leaders remained in Brisbane until after lunch Sunday, Mr. Putin was among the first to leave the gathering.
Both the United States and the Vatican were historic enemies of Russia while it was the Soviet Union, and are still enemies today. The East-West schism of the Russian Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church occurred in 1054. And since that time, both churches have been bitter opponents. In the early years of the Orthodox-Catholic dispute, both the Pope of the Catholic Church and the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church were calling each other the Antichrist. Maybe they both were right. The US-Vatican alliance helped bring down the Berlin Wall, which in turn further weakened the Soviet Union until its collapse in 1991. The US papal diplomatic relations were not only forged by the Roman Catholic infiltration of government agencies, but in familiarity when working together in a common goal to check the advance of communism, which is opposed to capitalism and religion. The US has not always had diplomatic relations with the Vatican because of opposing ideologies. The Vatican is historically totalitarian and is opposed to religious liberty. However, on January the 10th, 1984, the Vatican has achieved diplomatic relations with the United States. The contest between the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church has travelled those very same countries that the US-NATO coalition is sniping off one by one. There were tensions in Ukraine over the loyalty of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, who are loyal to Russia. And there are also tensions in other countries like Estonia and Serbia, who are of the Orthodox faith. Serbia is deeply divided because of the carrots and sticks approach of the EU dangling the reward of EU membership if Serbia joins NATO. Serbia is a staunch Eastern Orthodox state that has historical and present-day diplomatic relations with Russia. The annexation of Crimea is another controversy, with the Crimean population voting to be annexed by Russia, the majority of civilians in Crimea of the Russian Orthodox faith. The saga continues between the US-Vatican alliance versus the Orthodox Russian Federation.
Well, some lawmakers want to know why the Department of Homeland Security is apparently on a huge ammo buying spree. This is a just-placed order for more than 300,000 bullets, just the latest in a series of contracts that could add up to more than 1.5 billion rounds of ammo over the next 5 years. Critics say that's enough bullets to supply the equivalent of the Iraq War for 24 years, and they want to know why the DHS is doing it.
For, quote, massive civil war, end quote, in America as a result of a collapse of the dollar and the hyperinflation that will result. Now, what are they doing to prepare for this? They've just purchased, DHS alone, in 1 month, purchased 450 million rounds of 40 caliber hollow point HST ammunition from I believe it's ATK. But the entire fabric of federal agencies has purchased 750 million rounds just in the last few months. Well, why are they buying this ammo? It's not for target practice. You don't use expensive hollow point ammo, especially constructed to penetrate deeply even though it's hollow point. And you can't use that in the battlefield. The Geneva Conventions forbid it. There is only one use for that, and that's the American people.
Well, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, along with the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Office, have placed a large and rather interesting order. They've ordered 450 million rounds of ammunition to be made and delivered to them over the next 5 years. Now, the company Alliant Tech Systems, or ATK, was awarded the contract to manufacture 40 caliber ammunition high-performance bullets. Apparently these bullets, quote, provide optimum penetration for terminal performance. This refers to the way the tip of the bullet passes through barriers and expands, all the while holding its jacket in the toughest conditions.
What does it all mean? They're planning something. And now they have purchased thousands of these. These are bullet-resistant, level 3 bullet-resistant checkpoint booths. And if you look carefully, I'm going to send this around so you can take a look at it. There is an enclosure behind it. So those who are detained can immediately be put in that enclosure. Another thing they're buying, massive, and this is not one of the bigger ones, but it's a big one, even so. Massive armored vehicles, SWAT vehicles.
MRAP stands for Mine Resistant Ambush Protected. And what it is one big military, scary-looking tank-like truck. Since 2007, the Pentagon has bought 25,000 of them, costing taxpayers $50 billion. They're giving them to police departments across the country.
That the image of the beast is a replica of the Roman hierarchy. It's interesting to understand how they function. This is happening now. Now already you are targeted if you believe in individual freedom. You're designated by the government as a terrorist, a potential terrorist, if you believe in individual liberty. Oh, I think it was over 100 different such categories that are now considered to be terrorist individuals by the image of the beast. The image of the beast hates the U.S. Constitution. See how many I listed here. Well, I guess it was 72. Those that believe in end-time prophecies, potential terrorists. Those that are reverent of individual liberty, that's the foundation of our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. Those that talk about individual liberties. Well, we could go on, but
We turn now to that secret document, 16 pages long and stirring up so much controversy tonight. It is a kind of handbook for lethal power against terrorists, even if they are American citizens. ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl tells us about the news today.
By one count, President Obama has already used unmanned CIA drones to strike more than 300 suspected terrorist targets, even more than his predecessor. But today we learned just how much authority the administration believes it has to kill without trial or evidence suspected terrorists, even American citizens.
Do you remember the 2010 census? Do you remember how they came to everyone's front door and GPS their front door? Now there's going to be shortly 30,000 drones in the sky. 30,000 is estimated in a few years. What are drones capable of doing? If they have the GPS locations, they can do airstrikes. And someone down in Washington, D.C. or somewhere else, NORAD, can just work a drone over you remotely, take you out.
Hi, I'm Janet Napolitano, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Homeland Security begins with hometown security. That's why I'm pleased that Walmart is helping to make our communities more safe and secure. If you see something suspicious in the parking lot or in the store, say something immediately. Report suspicious activity to your local police or sheriff. If you need help, ask a Walmart manager for assistance.
Eric John Phelps, the author of Vatican Assassins, tells, and we have it on one of our videos, we have the audio of it, where he's interviewing a man who had done research, who said that the 3 top officials in the Department of Homeland Security are Jesuits, and all of the offices are staffed by the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. I did some study on that. I believe it was 1956 when the Jesuit Volunteer Corps was established. So basically you have the Jesuits running Department of Homeland Security.
Of Homeland Security.
No train I'd ever seen on those tracks going anywhere like the speed of this train. It was all yellow, it was all coherent unit, and it was carrying armor. Fighting vehicles, mobile cannon, mobile howitzers. And I was fishing for my camera furiously. And we were going, of course, in the opposite direction. And by the time I found my camera at the bottom of the stack, it had already passed. But there were probably hundreds of cars on that train with armor. And we wondered, where are they taking that? Because it wasn't showing up in any of the National Guard armories. And now we found out they are hiding them in hidden caches. Anymore to come up against anyone. They just use drones to take them out. The Roman Church is far-reaching in her plans and modes of operation. She is employing every device to extend her influence and increase her power in preparation for a fierce and determined conflict to regain control of the world. So Rome has not backed down at all. All that's happened is Protestantism has changed their view.
Too long ago, I talked with Dale Bohannon, whom I've known since, I guess, the mid-1980s. And he told me something very interesting that he found back in the fall of 2000 while he was on a business trip. Listen to this, folks.
I was pulled to the side road, which was a new cut gravel dirt road in front of a business, builder supply business, actually top-notch builder supply in Madison, Georgia. To my right, this was previously was a soybean field, and this little new cut road divided this field, and the right side of the road was filled with which I thought was portable toilets. I never looked at them that close. Same in color, maybe black, but which was an odd color. And I was sitting there going over my notes, and a van pulled alongside of me that turned out to be the property owner. And he greeted me, and he was by himself, and so we had a good little dialogue there, and I asked him about the field of black boxes. What were they? Because I'd never seen anything like that, and his statement was that if he told me, I would be one of few people in Madison, Georgia that knew about them. And he says they're disposable coffins, I believe he told me. And he says there's 100 at that time. He said there was 125,000 there. And they were stacked. He told me 15 high. I asked him who owned them, and he stated that the CDC owned them and that they were leasing the land, leasing his land for storage. And he said his brother worked with the CDC in Atlanta and had been asked by the CDC to do a 3-year extension to place temporary morgues all across the nation.
So in January of this year, 2005, we decided to drive to beautiful Madison, Georgia and take a look for ourselves. It was on a Sunday and no one was around, with the exception of this one pickup truck that was coming out the narrow road that we were going in on next to this field. We flagged down the pickup truck, and it was providential that the driver of this pickup truck turned out to be the son of the man that owned this field. So naturally, we started asking him questions. And he told us that not long ago, there had been as many as 500,000 of these grave liners or disposable coffins. We asked him for permission if we could look around, and he said yes. So we did.
We're just getting an idea for the size of these boxes. What could these boxes be used for? Well, they're called casket liners. And that's an interesting term, isn't it? It's a casket liner. When I first heard the term casket liner, I thought perhaps a lining for a casket. But this is too big to be on the inside of a casket. So certainly this could be used as a casket. This is an inexpensive casket. And you can see the size here. There's lots of room. I think my friends here, we could all probably get inside, and it might be a little cozy, but we'd fit just fine. Which tells me that these liners can be used for more than just one. And one more time, what kind of liners are these?
Casket liners.
These are casket liners.
That's what the man said.
That's what the man told us. And we're told that there are about, well, there were about 500.
Could very well explain why just weeks, I mean, could be 2 to 3 weeks prior to that meeting, that I had stumbled upon these, at that time, 125,000 disposable liners or caskets or coffins or whatever they could be termed as in that soybean field.
And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
Karin Linder stocks up on supplies at the supermarket. But Karin, like most people here in Sweden, won't be paying with cash when she gets to the checkout.
I personally never use cash. As you see here, I'm shopping. I use my scanner. When I check out, I'll use my credit card, and my banking I do on my iPhone. So that's it. I don't need any cash.
And they're saying, oh, we should get rid of the 500 euro note. In the UK, we're seeing the former chief executive of Standard Chartered. He's saying that we should get rid of the 50-pound note. So there's a war on cash going on. They're saying it's because they want to stop terrorism. They're saying because they want to stop money laundering. But as we've seen over and over, the banks are the ones that are involved in that anyway. So here there's a war on cash.
Where you've got private prison operators looking to lock everybody up. You've got NSA and GCHQ looking to spy on everyone 24/7. Then you've got Larry Summers and the monetary conglomerates who are looking to essentially remove economic sovereignty, to destroy that domain that encourages free trade. And without free trade, there is no capitalism. There is no freedom without free trade.
Popular culture proclaims the RFID chip is the mark of the beast. However, let us first ponder the scripture.
And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
Before we investigate what the mark of the beast is, we must first discover how the no buy and sell would be administered, and only a cashless society can achieve that. The greatest misconceptions are spread by repeating the opinions of others. Let us go straight to the source, the Bible, and learn the clear and distinct definition of what exactly is the mark of the beast. A beast in Bible prophecy is a kingdom, as explained in the following verse. Daniel 7:23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth. Now the mark which belongs to the papacy is the professed holy day of mainstream Christianity. Sunday is our mark of authority. The church is above the Bible, and this transference of Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. Catholic Record of London, Ontario, September 1st, 1923. Protestants accept Sunday rather than Saturday as the day for public worship after the Catholic Church made the change. But the Protestant mind does not seem to realise that in observing Sunday, they are accepting the authority of the spokesman for the Church, the Pope. Our Sunday Visitor, February the 5th, 1950. Sunday keeping went mainstream as a day of worship and rest in 321 AD, when Emperor Constantine decreed it under the influence of his flatterer Bishop Eusebius. The divinely appointed Sabbath, Saturday, was moved to Sunday, Dies Solis, and those true Christians who disobeyed the Sunday apostasy were penalized and persecuted. Bishop Eusebius was the hidden hand in this religio-political decree, as Emperor Constantine realized the religio-political benefits uniting pagans and Christians within the Roman Empire. Bishop Eusebius was part of an apostate Christian movement that evolved into the Roman Catholic Church, as Sunday keeping had been preeminent among apostate Christians around 70 years before Emperor Constantine's decree. The fourth commandment, Exodus 28, remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, has never been changed under any biblical or apostolic instruction. Jesus, the disciples, and all the early churches mentioned in the Bible, for example Corinthia, Thessalonica, Galatia, and churches in Rome, kept the Sabbath Saturday. The Pope's title Vicarius Filii Dei, vicar or representative of the Son of God, adds up to 666 in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Vicarius, or vicar, is derived from the word substitute, as the Pope assumes the title Substitute of Christ on earth. Therefore, Mark of the Beast 666 is a prophecy that every nation will enforce a Sunday law by fine, economic sanctions, and finally the death penalty. The United States or Vatican alliance can achieve this goal through controlling the global financial systems of the world, implementing sanctions or withholding global currency or access to the SWIFT international payment system. The Mark of the Beast is an invisible mark, and like the seal of God, which is also invisible, is an individual choice of whom to obey, symbolizing either God's commands or Satan's counterfeit. The mark in the forehead, pertaining to both the mark of the beast and the seal of God, signifies the moral choice of how they will obey, as the frontal lobe at the front of the forehead is where moral decisions are made. Therefore the mark is symbolic of that choice. However, the mark of the beast can also be found on the hand, signifying actions. For example, an atheist or Muslim can keep the global Sunday law by actions, and by those actions they will receive the mark in their right hand, different to those who receive the mark of the beast in their foreheads by believing and choosing Sunday as their religion. And those who refuse the Sunday law will be penalized and persecuted in stages of fines, imprisonment, and the death penalty. You may say that the Sabbath day, Saturday, belongs to the Jews. However, the book of Genesis negates this idea. Genesis 2:3. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So Genesis chapter 2 verse 3 silences the argument that only the Jews were commanded to keep the Sabbath. James chapter 2:10. For whosoever shall keep the whole law, and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. In the issue of the contest, all Christendom will be divided into two great classes: those who keep the commandment of God and have the faith in Jesus, and those who worship the beast in his image and receive his mark. Although church and state will unite in their power to compel small and great, rich and poor, free and in bond. Revelation chapter 13 verse 16. Yet the people of God will not receive it. But Christians of past generations observed Sunday, supposing that in so doing they were keeping the Bible Sabbath. And now there are true Christians in every church not accepting the Roman Catholic Communion, who honestly believe that Sunday is the Sabbath of divine appointment. God accepts their sincerity of purpose and their integrity before him, but when the Sunday observance shall be enforced by law, and the world shall be enlightened concerning the obligation of the true Sabbath, then whosoever shall transgress the law of God to obey a precept that has no higher authority than that of Rome, will then honour popery above God. He is paying homage to Rome and to the power that enforces the institution ordained by Rome, and is worshipping the beast in his image. Men will then reject the institution that God has declared to be the sign of his authority, and honour in its stead that which Rome has chosen in token of her supremacy. They will have then set their sign as their allegiance to Rome, the mark of the beast. And it is not until the issue is plainly set before the people, and they are brought to choose between the commandments of God and the commandments of men. Those who continue in transgression will receive the mark of the beast. Many think the RFID chip will be the mark of the beast. However, this theory does not pass the biblical test, but nevertheless the RFID chip, facial recognition machines, smart card with SIM, Apple Pay, and many other identification cards are validation that a world government can implement a no-buy-sell ultimatum if the Pope's mark, Sunday law, is not observed.
Breaking news tonight, the Pope in America. A rousing welcome for the man who's been called the rock star Pope. Rock star Pope Francis begins a historic visit.
The Pope, the two leaders will speak to the world, then hold a one-on-one meeting with only translators in the room, all before Pope Francis addresses Congress Thursday with Biden in attendance. Even though the president and the Pope are allies on issues ranging from climate change to income inequality to Cuba, even the Iran nuclear deal, the White House refuses to reveal what the two men will discuss. The White House refuses to reveal what the two men will discuss.
For the faithful who'd been waiting for hours, the emergence of Pope Francis shortly before 9 a.m. was the thrill of a lifetime. Thousands, led by the President and Mrs. Obama, waited to greet him. And after the official welcoming ceremony, both leaders addressed the significance of the visit.
And I believe the excitement around your visit, Holy Father, must be attributed not only to your role as Pope.
30 seconds left. Anything else?
Yes, I would like to just end with this note. As far as all the things that have happened while the Pope has been visiting here, the thing that bothered me the most is when he said Christ failed on the cross. And I did a report earlier in the day. People can go and look at where I referenced certain scriptures, but Christ didn't fail on the cross. He knew he was going to die on the cross, and he said, I'm giving myself willingly. So I was very disturbed to hear something like that.
He said that? I didn't know that. That was Christ's ultimate triumph.
Yeah, and he said he failed on the cross. There's an ABC News. I'm sure it's on multiple
Sounds
other
like something the devil would say, Jakari. I think.
And if at times our efforts and works seem to fail and not produce fruit, we need to remember that we are followers of Jesus Christ. And his life, humanly speaking, ended in failure. The failure of the cross.
Words from Cardinal Timothy Dolan, but before that, you can see the Pope greeting members of the religious faiths one by one. And as he entered the hall as well, greeting many who were there to see him. This is an important.
Papa Francesco, on behalf of this very distinguished group, representatives of the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Sikh, Native American, Jewish, Islamic, and Christian communities of New York City.
Yes.
You say to them,
Yeah.
look, I have to have the Sabbath
Yes.
off,
Yes.
which, may I just confess that I learned in my first meeting with Devon, all these years I thought the Sabbath was Sunday. I've been going to church We say worship on the Sabbath, worship on the Sabbath in the Baptist church, and you corrected me. You said, no, Sunday is the first day of the week. Sabbath is Friday sundown to Saturday sundown.
That's right. That's
I stand corrected.
That's because Sunday is a day of worship. You're supposed to be in a Christian church. But wait a second, aren't we supposed to have religious freedom in America? Some religions worship on different days. Because blue laws, which date back to colonial times, still ban that in a dozen states. Originally, they outlawed regular Sunday work. No buying, no selling, traveling, public entertainment, or sports even.
People, it's baked in, have always had this temptation to let work crowd out all the other things that matter. Family, faith, and they have to be told again and again, knock it off, don't work. It's interesting. You think people are lazy, but they work too much.
Americans work too much.
Maybe, but they should certainly be able to choose their own days off. The idea that somehow a bunch of guys in a state capital somewhere know what's best for us in terms of, you know, how many days off we take and when we take them.
Isn't it?
Everyone listen to the Pope speak on the importance of keeping Sunday as the Sabbath.
We are called to reflect more deeply on the mystery of creation and therefore of our own lives. We are called to rest.
Especially those in situations of greater vulnerability or risk. Legislative activity is always based to take care of the Codic people. To this you have been invited, called, accompanied by those who elect you. Yours is a work which makes me reflect in two ways on the figure of Moses. On the one hand, the patriarch and lawgiver of the people of Israel symbolizes the need of people to keep alive their sense of unity by means of just legislation.
Our particular campaign in the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work is about psychosocial risks and stress in the workplace. And the reason we decided on that topic is because our board is tripartite, governments, unions and employers. I think the evidence we have in terms of looking at long hours is that it's not so much which day of the week you are working for us. It's a question that every worker has to get adequate rest. Now, there are other cultural issues around the Saturday and Sunday working. And in particular for the Sunday working, I think it's interesting what the recent Eurofound survey has to say about this. There's an increasing number of people having to work on Sundays, an increasing number of people saying that it is impacting on their family lives. From the occupational safety and health point of view, we're very keen that workers get adequate rest. But I think if you look at that European Working Conditions survey from Eurofound, you will see that that Sunday working is definitely impacting as well on family life.
And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
stocks up on supplies at the supermarket. But Karin, like most people here in Sweden, won't be paying with cash when she gets to the checkout.
I personally never use cash. As you see here, I'm shopping. I use my scanner. When I check out, I'll use my credit card, and my banking I do on my iPhone. So that's it. I don't need any cash.
He is now joining the war on cash. We've seen that from the ECB, and they're saying, oh, we should get rid of the 500 euro note. In the UK, we're seeing the former chief executive of Standard Chartered. He's saying that we should get rid of the 50-pound note. So there's a war on cash going on. They're saying it's because they want to stop terrorism. They're saying because they want to stop money laundering. But as we've seen over and over, the banks are the ones that are involved in that anyway. So
popular culture proclaims the RFID chip is the mark of the beast. However, let us first ponder the scripture.
And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
Before we investigate what the mark of the beast is, we must first discover how the no buy and sell will be administered, and only a cashless society can achieve that. The greatest misconceptions are spread by repeating the opinions of others. Let us go straight to the source, the Bible, and learn the clear and distinct definition of what exactly is the mark of the beast. A beast in Bible prophecy is a kingdom, as explained in the following verse. Daniel 7:23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth. Now the mark which belongs to the papacy is the professed holy day of mainstream Christianity. Sunday is our mark of authority. The church is above the Bible, and this transference of Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. Catholic Record of London, Ontario, September the 1st, 1923. Protestants accept Sunday rather than Saturday as the day for public worship after the Catholic Church made the change. But the Protestant mind does not seem to realise that in observing Sunday, they are accepting the authority of the spokesman for the Church, the Pope. Our Sunday Visitor, February the 5th, 1950. Sunday keeping went mainstream as a day of worship and rest in 321 AD, when Emperor Constantine decreed it under the influence of his flatterer, Bishop Eusebius. The divinely appointed Sabbath, Saturday, was moved to Sunday, Dies Solis, and those true Christians who disobeyed the Sunday apostasy were penalised and persecuted. Bishop Eusebius was the hidden hand in this religio-political decree as Emperor Constantine realised the religio-political benefits uniting pagans and Christians within the Roman Empire. Bishop Eusebius was part of an apostate Christian movement that evolved into the Roman Catholic Church, as Sunday keeping had been preeminent among apostate Christians around 70 years before Emperor Constantine's decree. The fourth commandment, Exodus 28, remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, has never been changed under any biblical or apostolic instruction. Jesus, the disciples, and all the early churches mentioned in the Bible, for example Corinthia, Thessalonica, Galatia, and churches in Rome, kept the Sabbath Saturday. The Pope's title Vicarius Filii Dei, vicar or representative of the Son of God, adds up to 666 in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Vicarius, or vicar, is derived from the word substitute, as the Pope assumes the title Substitute of Christ on earth. Therefore, Mark of the Beast 666 is a prophecy that every nation will enforce a Sunday law by fine, economic sanctions, and finally the death penalty. The United States or Vatican alliance can achieve this goal through controlling the global financial systems of the world, implementing sanctions or withholding global currency or access to the SWIFT international payment system. The mark of the beast is an invisible mark, and like the seal of God, which is also invisible, is an individual choice of whom to obey, symbolizing either God's commands or Satan's counterfeit. The mark in the forehead pertaining to both the mark of the beast and the seal of God signifies the moral choice of how they will obey, as the frontal lobe at the front of the forehead is where moral decisions are made. Therefore the mark is symbolic of that choice. However, the mark of the beast can also be found on the hand, signifying actions. For example, an atheist or Muslim can keep the global Sunday law by actions, and by those actions they will receive the mark in their right hand. different to those who receive the mark of the beast in their foreheads by believing and choosing Sunday as their religion. And those who refuse the Sunday law will be penalized and persecuted in stages of fines, imprisonment, and the death penalty. You may say that the Sabbath day, Saturday, belongs to the Jews. However, the book of Genesis negates this idea. Genesis 2:3. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So Genesis chapter 2 verse 3 silences the argument that only the Jews were commanded to keep the Sabbath. James chapter 2:10. For whosoever shall keep the whole law, and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. In the issue of the contest, all Christendom will be divided into two great classes: those who keep the commandment of God and have the faith in Jesus, and those who worship the beast in his image and receive his mark. Although church and state will unite in their power to compel small and great, rich and poor, free and in bond. Revelation chapter 13 verse 16. Yet the people of God will not receive it. But Christians of past generations observed Sunday, supposing that in so doing they were keeping the Bible Sabbath. And now there are true Christians in every church not accepting the Roman Catholic Communion, who honestly believe that Sunday is the Sabbath of divine appointment. God accepts their sincerity of purpose and their integrity before him, but when the Sunday observance shall be enforced by law, and the world shall be enlightened concerning the obligation of the true Sabbath, then whosoever shall transgress the law of God to obey a precept that has no higher authority than that of Rome, will then honour popery above God. He is paying homage to Rome and to the power that enforces the institution ordained by Rome, and is worshipping the beast in his image. Men will then reject the institution that God has declared to be the sign of his authority, and honour in its stead that which Rome has chosen in token of her supremacy. They will have then set their sign as their allegiance to Rome, the mark of the beast, and it is not until the issue is plainly set before the people and they are brought to choose between the commandments of God and the commandments of men. Those who continue in transgression will receive the mark of the beast. Many think the RFID chip will be the mark of the beast. However, this theory does not pass the biblical test, but nevertheless the RFID chip, facial recognition machines, smart card with SIM, Apple Pay, and many other identification cards are validation that a world government can implement a no-buy-sell ultimatum if the Pope's mark Sunday law is not observed.